Hello and welcome to the latest edition of MPA TV. I'm Richard Tornay, Mortgage Professional America's US News Editor. And today we're going to be talking to one of the leading figures in the world of wholesale lending, Willie Newman, the founder, CEO, and president of Homepoint Financial. Described as the Godfather of wholesale, he's been a flag bearer for brokers since way back in the mid-1980s when he saw the advantages of wholesale lending over retail. He founded Homepoint in 2015, and within 5 years, it became the country's third biggest wholesale lender. Hello and welcome, Willie.
Oh, thank you, Richard. Appreciate it.
It's great to have you on the show. I believe it's the first time we've interviewed you at MPA, and in fact, you don't do many media appearances, I understand. How do you view the media? Avoid whenever possible, a necessary evil on occasions?
No, it's funny because in my career, I used to be very upfront of the organizations that I was fortunate enough to lead. And in this one, because maybe it's because of my advancing age, I've taken a little bit more of a back seat. But I think that there's an issue out there that I'm so passionate about that I feel like I have to be out front of it. And fortunately, I've got a lot of support from others in the industry, as well as, of course, our own Homepoint organization to evangelize the message. So I'm looking forward to the discussion.
Okay, well, in that case, the first proper question has to be, why are you known as the Godfather of wholesale lending? Although I think I've given away a small clue.
Yeah, so I like to say I was there at the creation. So I'll go back to the mid-late 80s. And I had worked in a savings and loan, and I actually learned in that job how to sell loans to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. Subsequent to that, I met a gentleman who became my mentor. He was looking to expand his mortgage banking business, and he really identified, Richard, the confluence of several different trends that he thought we could take advantage of. One was the savings and loan crisis, and because of that crisis, savings and loans at the time were the predominant lender, or I guess ultimate source of funds to homeowners. And because of that crisis, there were a number of loan officers that were displaced, who not only had no place to call home from an employment standpoint, they had no way in which to further their livelihood by selling loans or being able to have their mortgage loans funded. So he saw that trend. The second was really the evolution of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae. So as I said, when I started selling loans to Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, or Freddie Mac specifically, you had to ship the documents physically to Freddie Mac in order to get funded. That is not a scalable enterprise. So at the time, after I had started doing that or learned how to do that, the agencies had started to evolve, and they really started driving off of data as opposed to documentation. And he saw that, and he determined that you didn't have to be a large organization in order to really use Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae as your capital or funding source for mortgage loans. The third component really was there was this legal vehicle in place called mortgage brokerages. And at the time, this was so early, it was pre-subprime, Richard. The mortgage brokers primarily provided hard money loans to people who could not they were the lender of last resort on the mortgage side. But what he saw was that because this legal construct was in place, it could be used to really mainstream mortgage brokerages. So if you match up savings and loans or saving and loan oriented loan officers who are very much into mainstream origination, you line up Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae and look at the ability to scale up using their, I'll say at the time, more advanced ways in which you could sell loans. And then you look at this mortgage brokerage vehicle. If you put all those together, you don't have to be a large company in order to start to grow a large mortgage business. And that's exactly what we did. So like I said, long story, but I like to feel like I was there at the creation back in the late 80s.
Now, Homepoint evidently grew very fast and quickly. And can you pinpoint the key moments when you realized that the company was going places?
Sure. So, founded in 2015, and in 2018, we made the decision to invest heavily in wholesale. And so we participated, at the time in 2015, I still felt like wholesale would be the best opportunity, but it hadn't grown from a market share standpoint to the extent that we had anticipated. So we participated across all channels of origination at that time because, Richard, we wanted to be positioned to make sure that we were on a leading edge of where we felt the industry was going origination-wise. But in 2018, it became evident to me that This version of wholesale really is, the most sustainable that I've seen in my career. And I always have to give full credit to UWM and my friend Matt Ishbia for really designing the current version of wholesale. Really looking at the landscape, looking at where we felt the opportunity was, we invested heavily in 2018. We also brought on Phil Shoemaker, who leads our originations unit today. And Phil really was the catalyst for kind of operationalizing the vision that I had for us to expand into wholesale to a greater extent than we had previously. So I'd say 2018 was a primary inflection point for us.
I've heard Homepoint being described as a small group of people working very closely together, almost as though it's a family, if you like, as a family business feel. I don't know how accurate that is, but that's one of the impressions I've had. You have a motto, which is "We care." Very often the bigger a company becomes, the harder it is to maintain that close-knit ambience. And I don't want to sound cynical, but a lot of companies pretend they have that quality, but very often they're found wanting when they have to make difficult decisions, such as shedding jobs. What makes you stand out from the rest in that sense?
I would say that it's my personal involvement in the culture. So again, having a very long career, I've really learned the importance of culture, in essence, from day one, being in this business. And obviously the way in which that culture is promulgated for me has evolved over time. But I think, especially in an environment like this, the level of personal involvement the CEO has in not only defining the culture, but extending it out, and to your point, operationalizing it every day is absolutely critical. So I think, maybe it sounds a little bit like I'm saying the difference is me, but I think from a cultural standpoint, it has to come from the top. So I do think that differentiates us.
You mentioned that you had a mentor when you were younger, Stan Rhodes. Who was he to you, and what did you learn from him?
Oh gosh, he's the one who hired me, took a chance on me, and I think he taught me the business kind of back to front. So I actually started in capital markets, or back then we called secondary marketing. And I felt, of course I didn't realize it when I came into the business, but it was a great way to start because you really understood all the mechanics from a financial standpoint of, how to obtain leverage, how to take funding, how money is made, what are the pitfalls associated with, depending on the agencies, depending on leverage, et cetera. And so I kind of got that foundation at the beginning rather than, quite often entities are kind of built from the front to the back. So one, that, and two, he really gave me the opportunity to learn, probably a little bit actually in advance of when I deserved maybe, but as we were growing, he gave me the flexibility as he gave me different functions in the organization to really build them out kind of as I saw fit, not in a unstructured or unsupervised way, but just in a way that he allowed me to make some mistakes along the way. And I think that for anybody, it's really helpful to be able to make those mistakes and learn from those mistakes and build off of those mistakes, as opposed to, kind of having a safety net around you all the time. So, he taught me so much. And then, like I said, I think probably strategically, the most important thing he taught me was that dislocation creates opportunity. So, and those of you that hear me, I've talked to, they'll hear that a lot from me. But if you think about my original entry into the business was a massive dislocation, savings and loan crisis, lots of loan officers, disintermediated away from their companies. And it was a great opportunity for us to build a business. I think today we're in the middle of a significant dislocation in our business. And to me, it's a challenge to navigate through it, but it does create opportunity coming out the other end. So I think ultimately, strategically, that's probably the most important thing he taught me, is that dislocation does create opportunity.
Going to bring those issues up here right now. In fact, like everyone else in the mortgage industry, one of the biggest challenges you've had to face is your response to the COVID pandemic. But before that, you've spoken about the savings and loans crisis in of the mid 80s and early 90s, which was no small event in itself. And of course, we had the 2008 financial crash. What business lessons did you learn from those two episodes, and indeed from the COVID pandemic?
Oh yeah, so I think every time you learn more and you kind of add to your arsenal. Obviously, COVID was a very unique set of circumstances. I think, from the crisis, I think sometimes things are too good to be true. when they're too good to be true, you might want to check them out and make sure they are true. And so I think there was a lot of, obviously credit was, significantly overextended. There was a lot of dependency on home price appreciation and demand always being there, from a crisis standpoint. But I think you have to kind of stay true to what your principles are and, where you see the opportunity without extending too far into believing what everybody else says about, whatever business it is you're in. I think, in particular, the thing about COVID is that I was amazed at how quickly our organization adapted to COVID. I mean, literally within a week, we fortunately had the plumbing in place to be remote because we had a meaningful percentage of our associates that were remote, but we went to 95+% remote within a week. And I had no idea we could do that. So I think what I learned from, COVID, lots of things, but in particular, if you have the right type of culture in your organization, organizations can be very resilient and very adaptive. And I think we were able to leverage that in a way that really gave us the opportunity to grow, of course, in accordance with the market, but also above and beyond what the market was providing to us. So, but every cycle, lots of lessons learned. And I think, one of the things that's probably underappreciated, I've been thinking about this a lot, is that these dislocations don't have to be massive in order for you to take advantage of them. They could be small things, particular segment, particular geographies, but I think always being on the lookout for, when there's kind of this uncertainty where you can execute and create opportunity. I think it's a very worthwhile thing to be thinking about strategically for any organization and any leader.
Talking about uncertainty and creating opportunity, you mentioned your president of originations, Phil Schumacher, a moment ago. In January, when I interviewed him, he said it was your collective belief at Homepoint that this was probably going to be one of the worst years, if not the worst, in mortgage banking. What opportunities can you create in such an environment? And do you still feel the same way?
Right. So yeah, what I've said is that I think this is going to be the most challenging cycle since the financial crisis. And I think we're seeing it even today. I mean, obviously you have kind of almost a rate shock increase. It's taken 40% plus demand out of the system. And you still have a system that is $4 trillion. It's like supply is $4 trillion, demand is $2.5 trillion. Something has to adjust. I think the opportunity is, as I said, back in 2018, we felt like wholesale was going to win, just specifically doing business with mortgage brokers. And we've done a lot of work, to make that more than intuition. we wanted to actually prove that with data. And so in 2018, the HMDA data set was expanded, and it really allows anyone who digs down and does the deep analysis that we've been able to perform. You can do a very apples to apples comparison between different channels of origination in order to determine who is indeed providing the best deal to consumers. And we now have irrefutable evidence based on the data that mortgage brokers provide lower upfront costs and lower rates than retail lending does, consistently, pervasively, and across all income categories and across different racial demographics as well. So to me, the opportunity in a declining market is for those who are interested in navigating through it, is to migrate to the channel of origination that is the most efficient, because the most efficient is really the most valuable at this point in time.
We've been talking about how brokers are so important to you. Now, I understand that you've been lobbying against the FHFA's capital rule, which I could explain very briefly on very clumsily, possibly, that essentially proposes to reduce the capital relief the GSEs receive for transferring credit risk to private investors. But why are you against capital rule, and how does it undermine the broker's role?
The capital rule basically applies a surcharge from a capital standpoint to third-party originations, which includes, of course, wholesale originations that are sourced through mortgage brokers. This is based on pre-crisis performance data, which would indicate that mortgage brokers broker-originated loans coming through wholesale lenders don't perform as well as retail. I mean, the data is that data is irrefutable as well. However, post-crisis, the performance is very consistent amongst the different channels. And as a matter of fact, there are points in time in which the wholesale segment performs materially better, or at least marginally better than retail does. So the premise upon which this capital surcharge is applied is no longer valid and has not been valid for years. Further to the point, the capital charge itself has been at least in existence from a proposal standpoint for several years. And so I look at it as more of the agencies use this as a pretext to upcharge on third-party business where it's not warranted from a performance standpoint. And if indeed the FHFA's goals, which they've stated pretty clearly, are to expand into historically underserved and minority communities, penalizing the channel that does the best job of doing that is not the way to accomplish their mission.
Fair point. Now, changing the subject slightly, I spoke to one of your competitors recently about how wholesale lending sometimes comes across as a very cutthroat business. Now, on more than one occasion, I've seen CEOs involved in highly publicized spats with rivals. Now, we live in an age where, important people, famous people, including politicians, don't seem to rate decorum very highly these days. I understand from what you've told me before, you like to keep a low profile, but do you ever feel tempted to take a verbal swipe at some people?
No, I really don't. I don't know if maybe that's a character flaw on my part. Who knows? But I feel like, again, maybe this is a function of age and my experience in the business. I kind of feel like my mission really is to grow wholesale. And I think, mortgage brokers, they took a disproportionate amount of the blame for the financial crisis. Any strange sort of way, some of the regulation that came subsequent to that actually helped the channel in the long run, because it forced a certain amount of discipline into how we manage costs and how we interact with each other as a lender to broker. But I think everyone had plenty of blame for the financial crisis, but since then things have been changed so significantly that, to the earlier point, mortgage brokers are offering better deals to consumers, and they're serving the communities more broadly than their retail counterparts. So to me, if I can facilitate growing the whole wholesale pie, one, I'll have accomplished something that I'm very passionate about from a personal and a career standpoint, but also we'll be the beneficiary of it. And if others are the beneficiary of it, and frankly, if they out execute us, then they deserve more of it. So I'd rather focus on the segment as a whole. I'd rather focus on here at Homepoint our execution to make sure that we're doing the best job possible for mortgage brokers and their customers and our collective customers. And so I just don't get too wound up about what other people say.
I'd like to end today by asking whether you would do anything differently in business if you could start all over again.
Wow, every time I would. I think I think what I would do, a couple things I would do is you kind of commented on it earlier, where we grew very rapidly as an organization, especially in 2020 with the market and with the opportunity set that we saw. And I think I probably would have a little earlier spent more time on the cultural implications of growing that fast. And maybe that would have resulted in a bit slower growth. Maybe that would have resulted in more infrastructure. I don't know, but I think that's part of it. I think the second thing is like I said, it's like I've kind of mellowed in my old age, and I a little bit wish I would have been this mellow earlier. so maybe there's I might have ruffled a few feathers back in my day, or not treated people as well as I should have. But maybe that's the other thing too, is just make sure I like to pride myself in treating everybody that I interact with respect and dignity and interest. So hopefully I'm adhering to that.
Well, Willie, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been great having you on the show.
Absolutely. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
And thank you to all our viewers for watching as well. I've been your host, Richard Tournay, and we hope you'll join us again soon for another edition of MPA TV. May you all have a happy and successful week. Goodbye.